You're listening to Talk of Champions, an Ole Miss Spirit podcast with Ben Garrett.
It's time! It's time! It's time! It's time! It's time!
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Talk of Champions. I am Billy Embody, giving you guys a solo recruiting pod this morning as Ben Garrett readies for the Sweet 16. Our team at the Ole Miss Spirit, omspirit.com, bringing you all the action from Atlanta and, of course, on the Lady Rebels as well. Ole Miss baseball gets ready for another SEC series, but we have a lot of recruiting information to go over as spring ball rolls along. So do the visitors rolling into town for the Ole Miss Rebels. So sign up today for just $1 for your first week and get the inside intel. I'm told this is going to be a big visitor weekend for the Rebels. So make sure you are tuned in to the Ole Miss Spirit all weekend long. It's also my son Jack's first birthday. Pretty crazy on Sunday. Time does fly, but we're getting ready for a little family, little party on Saturday at the house, and going to have quite the time celebrating him. So looking forward to that. But we'll have, of course, our eyes on recruiting as well. And we're presented by RiverLand Roofing. No one is doing more for Ole Miss than Billy Landis and the RiverLand Roofing crew in the NIL space. 662-644-4297 is where you could reach them, or go to riverlandroofing.com for all your roofing needs. So appreciate them for supporting the pod. Let's lead off with the news of the day. And if you're listening to this on Thursday, the days are running together for me a little bit, but a big visitor arrived in Oxford for a visit, and that is four-star quarterback Landon Duckworth. We talked about him earlier this week and pretty much all spring long when it comes to recruiting for Ole Miss, because he's the top quarterback prospect on the board for Lane Kiffin and the staff. He is, I don't want to use the word perfect fit too judiciously, but a really good fit for this offense as well, with his ability to move around. He's a multi-sport athlete, state champion in basketball as well. And he recently got bumped up into the on 300, well inside the on 300. And he's just as productive as it gets in terms of the combination you want, passing the ball and rushing it. So really good fit here. He's still developing too, which is really the nice thing about it. But on to his recruitment. He makes his second visit to Oxford of the year. If you're watching on our YouTube channel, we appreciate you. We've got his highlights rolling right now. But if you've been following his recruitment, so he visited February 1st to Oxford. It was his only visit of that month where the recruiting calendar is open for recruits to visit college campuses to kick off the year. He was in basketball. He was on his way to another state championship. And after that visit, he told me Ole Miss sits at the top. And we go through the dead period, and, we didn't hear him say it. It's not a big deal, but we didn't hear him say it again. And fast forward to last weekend, he told On3's Chad Simmons, one of our great national recruiting reporters, that Ole Miss still at the top of his recruitment. Georgia, South Carolina, Florida State, North Carolina is kind of squeezing its way in there. But Ole Miss has that last official visit set for June 20th. So a big opportunity for them to impress before what I would imagine is a final summer decision for him. And then you can, really have him recruit down the stretch for you if you have other top targets and things like that, if you obviously do get him across the finish line. But Georgia hosts him May 30th, South Carolina June 6th, and then Florida State June 13th. So he was a one-time South Carolina commit. There has been an offensive coordinator change, I believe, since he backed off that commitment. Mike Shula taking over. Those of you who have been around a long time in the SEC, I grew up watching the SEC, and Mike Shula was the Alabama head coach at that point. And I remember watching the I formation. It was like Tim Castile and somebody else, and it was just off tackle left, off tackle right, fullback dive thrown in there here and there. But a very different offensive world that we live in now. So Mike Shula as the offensive coordinator there is just funny to me, because that's how I grew up watching. Mike Shula's offense is back when Brody Croyle was there. But Landon Duckworth is back in Oxford, so he gets to watch spring ball today. He'll get to break down film with the coaches, sit in on the meetings, and that's what you want if you're Charlie Weiss, Joe Judge, Lane Kiffin. And I mean, this is big that he's coming back in. I would use the term like this early in spring in a sense that, yeah, Ole Miss's spring is truncated and short and no spring game, but he's making his way to Oxford before the month of March is over. And then you do have another 2 months really that he could pop back onto campus and visit, which I don't know if he will. I don't know his schedule, if it's going to be super busy or what, but that does give you a chance to maybe bring him back in for another visit. And a key development, which is very much worth sharing on this podcast and on the Ole Miss Spirit today, we'll have a piece up about 5 prospects I feel like they've made a move with recently. And you've got to include his teammate, E.J. Crowell, in that discussion because he is one of the best running backs in the country, but he's also he's also somebody that hadn't really included Ole Miss lately in his recruitment, and Ole Miss is kind of battling to get in to that top group. He's a 5-star if the rankings ended today, both for On3 and the On3 industry ranking. And EJ Crowell is at this point well traveled, but he's going to be in Oxford April 19th. He's fresh off of a visit to Alabama, seeing practice. Alabama's among his top schools. Texas is in there, Auburn, and he's got a couple others in there. He dropped his top 6 recently, but a really impressive prospect to his teammates with Landon Jackson. So Landon Duckworth, the Jackson, Alabama teammates are really 2 of the elite prospects in this 2026 cycle. And Ole Miss now appears to be not only at the top of the race for Landon Duckworth, but inching its way back up into the race for EJ Crowell, who is, again, one of the top running backs in the country, who is a recently reclassified prospect as well, moved up from 27 to 26. So if they can find a way to pair EJ Crowell with Jamichael Jones, you've got Demarius Yates in state, but that would be a heck of a 1-2 tandem, and both of them hail from the state of Alabama. Ole Miss, dark horse at this point for an EJ Crowell, but they are getting him on campus, which is a really nice sign, at least to come. Before we go any further and jump into some of the other prospects that are hitting campus and just hit campus, we're going to talk a little bit about our friends at Status Jet. Ben Garrett and I always joke, somebody help us pay the bill for Status Jet and get us to wherever we need to go. But it's true. They don't require a membership, so it's kind of a one-off deal if you want it to be. So give them a shout. You'd be surprised in terms of at flying in and out of a place this way. Like if you wanted to go to see the Rebels, it's a little late for the Sweet 16, but they could probably still get you there. But you could fly in, you could fly out, and by the time you talk about doing a hotel, renting a car, paying for parking and Ubers and all those types of things, it's an expensive trip, but Status Jet can get you there safe and sound with a level of luxury. And talk to them about a discount code when you mention the Ole Miss Spirit. So that'll get you a discount on a round trip flight, which is pretty nice. Going into the next piece of recruiting, Ole Miss did host some top targets for practice on Tuesday, but the bigger news for me today is another visitor that is popping up on campus the same day that Landon Duckworth is here in Oxford, and that's Kamarian Johnson is back. He was just on campus for a visit, and he is one of the top edge prospects in the country. He's a huge target for Randall Joyner, and he's a big dude. He goes by Mari. Everybody calls him Mari, and a really, really good prospect. Kind of like at least me looking at him physically, I think he's just going to be a really good college football player. He's not necessarily somebody that oozes with the insane traits that make up like a no doubter first round type of pick at this stage of his life. But he's listed 6'5", 250. I think he's maybe just a touch shorter than that, but a really intriguing prospect who has some really nice tape out there. And Randall Joyner has really prioritized him in a big way. to have him on campus last weekend and also come back. He's back again. So this is a top target for Randall Joyner. If you're looking at the guys that he can get, Mari Johnson is really somebody that is super intriguing, and he's also battling Auburn, Alabama, some of these other programs for him. If he can pull him out of Muscle Shoals, it might be one of the better jobs Randall Joyner's done in terms of recruiting. He plays with that edge, that motor. Again, if you're watching on YouTube, rolling the highlights here, that you really, really want out of a defensive lineman. And he could play all over. Like, I think his position versatility is what would make him a really strong college football player. Just that ability to maybe add more weight and play a strong side defensive end spot. Then you could line him up along the interior and pass rushing downs. You see a lot of him on the edge in his tape, but he still is able to get off after the quarterback because of his high motor in a way. So Ole Miss hosting him again is a big storyline for today on Thursday, if you're listening to this. And we'll be watching really closely because getting him back again is a big, big deal for Ole Miss. So Lane Kiffin, they're continuing to really beat down the doors of these top prospects and get them comfortable on campus and getting them back around the program more and more and more. And so I think this is an interesting time of year for this program, because you're not fully like into official visit season when it's like May and June and all of that, but you're also in a situation where you're starting to build that momentum where these prospects that really are eyeing these summer decisions are starting, I think, at least from what I'm kind of seeing, you're starting to see them kind of limit their list and trim their list down a little bit. So that's the good thing. When you get them on campus, you can kind of continue to build off of that momentum and just kind of hold their attention, and you keep them right in kind of the mix of where you're kind of hoping to be once you get to official visits. And then if you knock that out of the park, great. That's the big thing. Now, do want to talk about one key prospect here, of course, because I obviously teased the big news of Landon Duckworth coming in. But when it comes to big news, no bigger news than who Ole Miss had on campus last weekend, and that is 5-star wide receiver Tristan Keys. And Keys' visit to Ole Miss is one of the biggest storylines in college recruiting this past week. And now it's going to be a long battle for him. This is one where he's committed to LSU. He's going to continue to take visits elsewhere. But that's what you'd expect from the number one wide receiver in the country, and somebody that is, of the caliber of Tristan Keys and as desired by programs like Alabama, Tennessee, and others. But, I think the next step for this recruitment, and something that Ben Garrett and I talked about a little bit earlier this week, is when does Tristan Keys pop up at Ole Miss next? That's the next step in this recruitment. That's the next conversation that is going to ultimately be had as far as when are they going to get him back to Oxford. And it could be a random time, could be a time where kind of like this, where he popped up and you're like, oh, okay, that is a big development. Actually, let's keep a close eye on that. But that's the thing with Tristan, is he keeps things close to the vest, but a really, really good prospect, worth the drama, worth all of the push. And this is going to be a fun one to follow. So just wanted to obviously bring his name right back up to the top. But when you get out of state, I think this is where, if you ask me to pick a state that could make or break Ole Miss's 2026 class, I'm going with Georgia. I think this is a state that Ole Miss has recruited very well. They have themselves in the mix for a high quality group of prospects, and they've hosted them multiple times and have official visits in some cases lined up. They have an opportunity to really kind of clean up in the state of Georgia when it's all said and done. And they'll be getting some top talent from that state back on campus. But one prospect that did pick up offer this week is Tyler Chuckuman. Sorry, I'm working on it. Somebody said it to me the other day, and it rolled right off the tongue. It didn't for me in that case, but the 6'5", 290-pound offensive lineman out of Douglasville, Georgia, goes to South Paulding, is one of the big risers of the spring, and he was actually on campus for Ole Miss this past Tuesday, and Ole Miss extended an offer. Really liked what they saw out of him. They now become the latest power conference program to offer him. He's picked up offers from NC State, from Minnesota, from others as his recruitment has taken off. And he's going to get back for an official visit here in the summer and really, line it up where Ole Miss, now that they've offered, has become a major contender for him. So he's got, I believe, Cincinnati and USF down in Tampa hosting him for an official visit. Those are June 5th and June 20th. And actually, I think I probably said Cincinnati, right? So Cincinnati and USF, two AAC or one AAC team, one Big 12 team hosting him there. But his recruitment has really taken off. NC State, Minnesota, programs like that jumping into the mix. Now you got Ole Miss hosting him and expected to host him for an official visit. This is an intriguing offensive lineman. One thing that has really been shared with me, and I want to kind of touch on this as a little bit of a sidebar as Tyler's film rolls online, if you're watching on our YouTube channel, is the price, and it's still crazy to me we're talking about it like this, but the price for offensive linemen, not only in the transfer portal, but in the high school ranks for high-quality offensive linemen, is astounding. I mean, you're talking about, if you are a power conference tackle starter and you're anywhere decent, you're probably sniffing around at seven figures, which is nuts. And I've kind of talked about this a little bit with like the running back room, with taking multiple quarterbacks. I think offensive line, especially with the hit rate being all over the place nationally, you got to take multiple offensive linemen, and you've got to take your chances at the ones that can develop, because if you hit, then you can maybe quote unquote save a little bit in that regard. And you can then potentially get a discount on your offensive line, which is helpful, because once you start really standing out or having a standout group, people are going to come calling, because it's the hardest position to nail in college football, in my opinion. So that was just a little sidebar there, but Tyler's just the latest to pick up an offer. But back on to the Georgia side of things, and kind of what I was talking about with the state being so key. Rodney Colton was back on campus last weekend. He's been a constant visitor for Ole Miss. He's out of Noonan, Georgia. He's a former South Carolina commitment, a really talented player, a top, almost top 150 overall prospect on On3, a top 10 linebacker. And Ole Miss is really, I think, surging for him. I'm going to drop my class prediction piece later today. So if you're on the site, again, subscribe. Ole Miss Spirit, $1 for your first week. But Rodney Colton is one that's going to be in there. And just because Ole Miss has just made such a good impression on him, and he's been multiple times. Tennessee's another school that really stands out to him. Florida State is in there. Colorado, UCLA, sniffing around. But a really talented prospect who I think Ole Miss is just surging in a way that really stands out to me. He has official visits set to SMU, UCLA, Penn State, Missouri, Tennessee, Colorado. Just a really large group. He is a heavily recruited linebacker, and Pete Golding has been on him in a big way. And obviously Tennessee is there. Noonan is, the Noonan standout has really just, been a constant there. Missouri's hosted him. He's been everywhere, I feel like. But I just like where Ole Miss is. I think that they really feel like he's bonded well there. So I know it's probably a little bit of a stretch, but quite honestly, linebacker recruiting this cycle, I think, could go a bunch of different ways. But Rodney Colton's going to be in there. I just kind of like what I heard about it, the way he is and was on campus and things like that. So I'm going to toss him in there in my class prediction piece. And then somebody that I think Ole Miss made a move for and has really kind of elevated itself in his recruitment is Nasir McCoy. really talented, outgoing prospect that has programs like Georgia, Auburn, and others in the mix for him. I think he's a really, really well-traveled prospect as well. He's somebody that, takes a lot of visits and does all of those things, but he's in the state of Georgia once again. And if you're looking for prospects that, the Rebels can make moves with and continue to kind of set the pace for and things like that, that's another prospect that you could see them uh, sitting in a strong position for and being there right to the end. Now, another prospect that just got to town for a visit is Graham Houston, big interior offensive lineman from Buford, who is teammates with Nasir McCoy and has been to Ole Miss multiple times. So he's somebody to keep an eye on and just continue to keep tabs on, because Ole Miss has really been one of his top schools. He has a top 4 right now of Florida, Georgia, and Florida State. So he's going to be back in town this weekend for an unofficial visit. Again, has been to campus multiple times. So I think he's somebody to start keeping an eye on. He seems to, you know, uh, keep tabs on Ole Miss pretty closely. His former teammate Hayden Bradley is on the roster, going through spring ball right now. So I think Ole Miss is in a strong spot for him too. It's still that early. I was talking about it earlier. That early positioning where you could really kind of start to set your key group of guys that you're in the mix for, and you're standing in a strong spot for. But it can obviously go a bunch of different ways too. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they do in the state of Georgia. Again, I think it's a make or break state for the Rebels. And then, that's before we've even talked about, a guy like Anthony Davis, who has also been a bunch of places, Alabama, Florida, and others. But, Ole Miss is going to host him in a couple weekends. And then you get to an Ole Miss legacy who's just back in town. Deuce Gerald's 4-star defensive lineman, top 100 prospect, a must get for Ole Miss, and Randall Joyner this recruiting cycle, also from the state of Georgia. And that's just kind of the tip of the iceberg on these Peach State prospects that are in town, are coming to town, going to take official visits and all that. There's many more. Just looking at the group that is expected in town later this spring and summer, but a really good group of Peach State prospects, and Ole Miss is recruiting them very, very well. So kudos to them for spending the time in the right places. When you look at the state of Georgia, very, very talent rich, one of the top states in terms of producing talent. So I think you're looking at a well run, organized recruiting effort when it comes to picking the states that Ole Miss spends a lot of time in. And one of those that we know that Ole Miss spends a lot of time in is Tennessee as well. And they also had Jack Fuchs in town. He's out of Hendersonville Beach High School, a really top target for them, 4-star offensive lineman, a really good prospect overall. Penn State, South Carolina recently offered. You've seen Kansas State, Arkansas, Mississippi State be in the mix as well. He called Ole Miss one of his top schools, and that's after the Rebels offered in February, and he got back to town for a visit this past weekend. So a really, really just diverse and deep offensive line pool of targets for John Garrison that I like. I mean, there's a good mix of guys that can come in and play right away from a size and physicality perspective and athleticism perspective. And then you also have guys that are going to take time to develop. And there are guys that are flip candidates. There's guys that are, in state. You're just seeing them cast a wide net predominantly over the South of where to go and where to spend your time. So kudos to Ole Miss. I think that's one of my biggest takeaways since, coming here in November is the time being spent well. Like quarterbacks, you recruit nationally. We've seen that they've gone to the kind of coast to coast to recruit them truly, and that's very normal for high level programs. But then outside of that, Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, Texas, Tennessee, Georgia, Florida, a little bit out to the East Coast and things like that. But, they're spending their time in the right region. They recruit a little bit up in the Midwest, some of those tight ends and things like that. But, a really just well-organized recruiting machine right now for Ole Miss. So things are going in the right direction there. Do want to remind you guys as well about Roback.com, RHOBACK.com. Use code Ole Miss 20 for 20% off your order today. Last time we talked, we mentioned the Azalea collection just in time for Masters weekend. So get this Mississippi powder blue, though. I really, really like that one. That's a clean look. You can get it ready for Easter and really have your significant other appreciating how good you look on Easter and all of that. So you can they also have the kids some of the kids collection where you can match and do all those things. So that is always a good idea. And when you spend more than $100, it's free shipping, I believe, too. So good point there to also just spend more time on that Roback site. Just sometimes I'll go on there and see if they've added new things, new options. So they've really upped their game a good bit, and we appreciate their support of the Ole Miss Spirit. So do you want to touch on one prospect that if we're sitting on, flip watch type of players that, this could be one to watch? It's Carson Snead. We dropped an update on him on the Ole Miss Spirit, and he's somebody that I think Ole Miss did a really good job positioning itself for. I think if you got Carson Snead on, a little what's it called, like a true serum, he would tell you that Ole Miss is the biggest competition for Tennessee, and he's been committed for a minute now down or over to playing his college ball in Knoxville. But I think he's really just bonded well with the coaching staff and what they have in mind for him. He seems really comfortable in Oxford, just from what he told me. I talked with him on the phone, but Tennessee's okay with him taking visits. They continue to recruit him really hard, and that's something he shared with me that he actually likes. They're not like trying to really shut him down and all of those things, but Carson Snead is somebody that I think is really listening, is going to get back for an official visit, and that's exciting if you're an Ole Miss fan to keep an eye on there, because he is and he said it himself, he's a ready-made college tight end, somebody that can step right in and be what you need him to be right away. So wanted to leave you guys with a little flip watch before we wrap up with just a touch of transfer portal news here. And the basketball side of thing is heating up. We'll touch on that in just a moment. But I do want to say that Ole Miss did extend an offer to a junior college defensive back, and somebody that I actually know really well from his days at SMU, and that's Jaden Lawton. So Jaden Lawton has a really interesting story, and SMU ended up signing him in just his first year of high school football. And that was when he was at a senior at Lucas Lovejoy. And for those of you who really follow recruiting closely, Lucas Lovejoy, one of the top talent producers in the state of Texas. And Jaden Lawton is this like long, skinny, but super athletic and raw defensive back. There's even a little bit of a moment where maybe he could play in the on the offensive side of the ball, but they go and they offer him as a cornerback, sign him, and he ends up. I don't know if he even. Maybe he made it a year, but basically academics just couldn't figure out the college life, and it was unfortunate. I think it was pretty bad. So he goes JUCO, bounces around a little bit there, and since then he's really gotten comfortable at Tyler Junior College. He's emerged as one of the top junior college defensive backs in the country. He's the number 3 corner in the junior college ranks. Really talented prospect. When you draw up like how a corner should look, Jaden Lawton looks like that. He is just super long and just a physical freak, So if he figures it out, the SEC or wherever he ends up playing his college ball, it's going to be really impressive. So it's not necessarily a true transfer portal tidbit there, but he is a junior college prospect who is transferring to a 4-year. So, and that comes on the heels of Ashad Williams signing with Wake Forest, the North Alabama transfer defensive back who's going to graduate and join a new team, and it'll be Wake Forest in May. But he was at North Alabama. He's from Russellville, Alabama. So there was kind of a thought that maybe Ole Miss with that tie could get him, but he ends up signing with Wake Forest. So that one is over with, it appears. But that's when they offered Jaden Lawton. Alex Brown, the director of player personnel, does have a relationship with him. He was at SMU when Jaden was signed. So they've obviously kept in touch, kept tabs, and they extended an offer. So another name to watch as Ole Miss, one of their biggest pieces of what they'll go after in the transfer portal this spring is the cornerback, safety, just general secondary position. So that is worth noting. They extended an offer there, and we'll update you as things progress there. But do want to flip over to the basketball side of things. Of course, Chris Beard and the Rebels are getting ready for Michigan State, but they are having to balance the transfer portal side of it like everybody else. So it's quite the time to have to deal with this. But one name who has emerged as a top target for the Rebels in the transfer portal is Isaiah Coleman, and he's out of Seton Hall. Do want to mention him but also say Ben Garrett has done a terrific job keeping very close tabs on the transfer portal for basketball as well. Has a couple of pieces up on the Ole Miss Spirit, so check them out, omspirit.com. But Isaiah Coleman, 6'5", sophomore, former 4-star recruit who originally was committed to Charleston in high school, who had Pat Kelsey, the head coach, now at Louisville. Pat Kelsey leaves. He ends up going to Seton Hall. He was one of the top scorers in the Big East this season. He averaged 15.6 points per game, so he could certainly fill it up. But Louisville right in the mix. Of course, Ole Miss, Oklahoma State, Washington are the schools to keep a close eye on. He's originally from Virginia, so it looks like he doesn't have the Cavaliers or Virginia Tech in the mix there, but Isaiah Coleman is a really intriguing prospect in the transfer portal now that Ole Miss is after and trying to set up a visit and get things to the point that when they get back to Oxford, they can start hosting these guys. I don't believe they've hosted anyone. What I'm seeing a lot of, and this is a good segue, is I'm seeing a lot of players say that, look, we have options. Let's take in these options. Let's do some Zooms. Let's see what they're going to offer. Let's see what their plan is. And then let's go from there. And that is such a departure from where we were covering this. Like, if you didn't get a guy into the portal, it was over. Like, before if you weren't the school that got him in, it was over. Like, you might as well, give up. Like, if you didn't know somebody was going in, you give up in the early days of the portal. It was called pre-portaling. Now, if you get into the portal, you've got agents that can work it year round. They can advise you to say, hey, this is a good situation. We think you'll be highly recruited. And then you really let it play out and let the market go. And that's where it can get a little nuts. So it's just so weird now, but it's a little slow moving. Like, people have asked if there have been any true visitors. I think they've done some Zooms and things like that, but we'll see visits heat up. It wouldn't shock me if they hosted somebody after the weekend and got guys on campus. But, that's the good part about playing deep into March Madness. And Jakari White is another name to keep an eye on as well. He's from North Dakota State. He's actually got an interesting story to how he's made it to the college level. He's originally from Orlando, Florida, my home state, and just finished up his 3rd year at NDSU. He spent a year in JUCO. He didn't play basketball his junior year, and then he was injured his sophomore year. He had knee surgery. It was just a torn meniscus. He said he played in the summer, had a good summer, and he went to JUCO and it paid off. Had a quick rise, was able to go to NDSU over some smaller offers. But now he's emerged as an all-league guard for NDSU. He averaged 17.1 points per game, 39% from the field, almost 40% on 7.1 attempts per game. So he's a high clip 3-point shooter, really, really impressive player that is at the lower level of college basketball, but still very, very productive. Florida State, Ole Miss, Virginia Tech are talking with them a lot. Alabama, Tennessee are also poking around on that one. But as far as what he said about Ole Miss, they always tell me how good of a fit I am and that I'm exactly what they're looking for. They're going to have to rebuild their roster, and they want guys who are skilled and that defend, like me. They talk about their community a lot. So Oxford standing out there. So we'll keep an eye on. On this one. He'd like to be committed by the first or second week of April. He wants to take visits next week, and this will be one to keep an eye on. Regardless of what happens in the NCAA tournament, he wants to take visits next week. He wants to be committed relatively soon. So one to watch for Ole Miss as they continue to attack the transfer portal because, like Chris Beard said when we talked to him before they left from Milwaukee, he was like, a lot of guys with SR next to their name. So look, guys, this has been a fun Talk of Champions. We'll be back with another live show on Friday morning. So looking forward to that as we kick off another huge weekend of Ole Miss sports. So appreciate you guys sticking around. We appreciate RiverLand Roofing for all your roofing needs. Few are doing more in the NIL space for Ole Miss than RiverLand is. So make sure that you check them out. RiverlandRoofing.com, 662-644-4297. Appreciate Billy Landis and the crew over there for all they do for us out on Talk of Champions. So thanks for listening, everyone. Have a great Thursday as the Sweet 16 heats up, and we'll catch you next time on a live Talk of Champions. Thanks for listening, everyone.